Let's do it.
I want to welcome everyone to today's presentation in our series, the Partner Positive series from Neon One. Today we're going to be hearing from Mark Becker and Neon One certified consultant partner, Cathexis Partners, on 8 simple ways using data to take your peer-to-peer fundraising to new heights. On our next slide, just want to give a little bit of a exploration. One more click is going to show the cool graphic, actually, in terms of who Neon One is, who is actually putting on today's walkthrough of this extremely important topic, especially as we head into year-end fundraising, a time where peer-to-peer is very important. Neon One is a technology ecosystem that is looking to provide a holistic series of technology and services for mission-driven organizations like your own. On the next slide, we do this in a few different ways. The few products that we have, Neon CRM is a constituent relationship management system used by thousands of organizations of varying sizes and revenue. We also have a client case management platform from Civicor, as well as powering the largest giving days in the United States. North Texas Giving Day raised $50 million in one day, and that is us. And actually, peer-to-peer played a really big role in that. Before getting into today's focus, we also have an arts and ticketing platform called Arts People, very, very geared toward the theaters space. But then what we're going to also be doing is exploring how the concepts that Mark is talking about apply to our Rally-bound peer-to-peer product, which is utilized by organizations like Michael J. Fox Foundation, Cystic Fibrosis, as well as one of the examples that Mark is going to be showcasing today. And when it gets into me, I actually use Rally-bound myself. Neon One does a few other things, including web design, but most importantly in terms of today is the fact that we curate our consultant and technology ecosystem in terms of the things that we put our trust and stamp of approval on. And Cathexis Partners is one of those, not just for Rally-bound, but also for Neon CRM in terms of their certification. Then we also have a lot of great integrations, such as an integration into Facebook fundraisers through the Rally-bound platform. And this has helped us generate $10 billion through the Neon One ecosystem. That number needs to be updated to, I think, 11 billion, given the numbers that we've seen this year. And we serve more than 30,000 nonprofits. And again, I actually think I need to update that slide. I think we're at 35,000 at this point. So a few housekeeping items on the next slide before I hand it on over to Mark. One more click shows us that, hey, this is being recorded. So if you got to drop off early, or if you're checking this out a little bit later on, well, great. You probably found it on our YouTube channel. So I'm going to try to get this up later today on the Neon One Partners YouTube channel. There's also tons of more recordings that you could check out relating to peer-to-peer, client case management, social media, retention, data hygiene, all this great stuff. And of course, we'll be following up if you're interested in hearing more about Cathexis, Rally-bound, or just the concepts of what we're going to be exploring today. And I'm especially excited for Mark's presentation. Mark, you and I have known each other for a few years, but to be able to team up on something that hits on the sweet spot of data around the engagement for peer-to-peer, I'm really, really excited. And I'm going to hand it off to you and take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Tim, and good afternoon, everybody, or good morning, depending on where you're calling in from. Just briefly about myself and Cathexis Partners. I'm the founding partners of Cathexis Partners. Started the company a little over 11 years ago now, and we've worked with hundreds of nonprofits, higher ed and K through 12 organizations with their online fundraising and database and CRM needs. And we've worked on literally thousands of peer-to-peer campaigns specific to kind of today's topic. And we'd love to share some tips, some pain points, some experiences from the trenches, working alongside folks like yourselves. And hopefully you find some of these tips useful, and maybe even a little bit of humor along the way, because that's how I roll, or attempt to. I always love these webinars because it's all so one-sided. You're all on mute. So I'm just a assuming that you're going to be laughing hysterically along the way. And Tim, if you just want to do me a solid and pretend to laugh occasionally just to make me feel better.
I will pop in to laugh. There's a lot of great GIFs in today's presentation. And folks, there is a Q&A if you want to even show your appreciation to Mark during it. Go ahead. Also, don't forget to use social media too. You can show your appreciation that way. At Rallybound is where we can definitely follow the conversation today. So Mark, take it away again.
Yeah, and feel free, like Tim said, to ask those questions as you think of them, and we'll get to them along the way. So let's dig right in. So, all right, the first thing is, looking at when to start recruiting. The general rule of thumb that I've always heard and that I've always recommended is earlier, right? Unless you're starting up a campaign 1 year prior to next year's campaign at the actual physical event or at the virtual campaign, date, anniversary. Earlier is always a better idea, but you really need to get into your data and making sure that people aren't feeling like the Griswolds and just all alone in the parking lot if they do register early. You better have a plan to support them and know when the optimum time is to start reaching out and supporting folks and making sure that there's a engagement strategy, not just transactional. Hey, you did this, thanks for that. Here's a receipt for this. Next do this. Really create that whole engagement and figure out the right timing on things. So dig into past year's campaigns if it's a legacy event or a virtual campaign, and find out where your top performers, when your top performers registered, and really look at making that your key date to really focus on making sure that you're launching, because your top fundraisers, your biggest fundraisers, typically register with much earlier than the others, and just verify that by looking at your data. But you'll probably see that your top fundraisers register earlier, and the earlier you can register folks, the more time you have to communicate with them without beating them over the head bi-weekly or multiple times a week with communication. So find that sweet spot. And beyond just email, also consider that for multi-channel communication, be it direct mail, social media, every other way you're connecting, phone calls, old school, right? Notes, whatever you're doing with your top fundraisers, your VIPs, your key cheerleaders, make sure that you're doing it all in a planned way based on drilling into your data and figuring out where that sweet spot is to start your communications. Kind of along that line, make sure you have source codes associated with your communications out. So when people respond, those little tokens or short URLs or vanity URLs that you're using, or whatever you're doing to collect how people have heard about you, make sure you're tracking all that to help to determine which strategies are working and where your money is best spent. Again, the data is there, or can be there, if you are actually using source codes, and usually very easy to implement so that you can figure out where people registered from, how they heard about you, and what made them take action, and make sure you're spending the money in the right places. Right? Consider figuring out personas for your different types of participants. Really get to know and deep dive into your data and figure out, of your top fundraisers, what is their connection to your mission, your cause, to your organizations, and your top donors. Do they have a direct connection to the cause as well, or just to those individuals? Really get to know who your constituents are, so that you can really have a dialogue with them and make sure you're communicating to them how they want to be communicated, and they are hearing you. The more you can learn about somebody by digging in and looking at past event data or whatever constituent information you have, the more you can personalize those notes, those emails, those messages, those phone calls to individuals, the more you're going to be able to make it seem much more personal. And I mentioned phone calls and notes, handwritten notes, quite frequently, just more suggested. I know most people are probably rolling their eyes and say, how do I have time for that? But considering your VIPs and so forth, it's worth trying to figure out who those people are and taking the time to get to look back and see what they've done with you and for you and engaging with them. For example, on the email side, look for the previous year's results and add a personal note in your recruitment email that automatically brings in the amount that they fundraised last year. So that obviously you want to first of all make sure your data is clean, and I'll talk more about that later. But if you have faith in the accuracy of your data, then and you feel like you have data integrity, then you should be able to send these customized, personalized messages and feel that people are getting the messages appropriate to them. Maybe thank them for being one of the top 50 fundraisers from last year. Or maybe if it's a physical event, include in the email, hey, last year you ran a 9:23 average mile on a 5K, and you took 99th place in your group. Great job. Do you want to set a new PR personal record this year? Come back out. Anything you can do to really make them realize that you know and you care about their involvement with you in the past. Another example, hey, you've participated, you're a legacy, thank you, maybe even give them a badge on their personal page or in an email. Hey, you've been with us for 5 years. This is great. Thank you so much. Over that time, you've raised over $10,000, and we sincerely thank you for your continued support. So people recognize and know that you know and acknowledge their work efforts to help the mission. All right, now moving on, overall campaign communication, just make it more compelling. This is a cookie cutting machine, get it? Get out of the cookie cutter messages that say, last year we had 3,000 participants and raised 150,000. That's great, you should definitely share that, but make it more compelling, right? Take it to the next level by adding more compelling data and details to help motivate. For example, last year we raised $1.5 million. With that money, we were able to fund 5 research grants and have produced 800 hours in the lab with 2 new clinical trials set to launch next year. Imagine the impact that someone's going to get from a message like that versus just, we had a bunch of people and raised a bunch of money. Well, that's what we're actually doing with it, and how powerful that can be. And sharing that back with your participants by making sure that your data goes both ways and you share it out. And then moving on, motivate participants to raise more by, again, sharing your acknowledgement and your knowledge of who they are and what they've done and how they've interacted with you. And really, you can really kind of blow their minds by, making them think, oh, how do they know this about me? They're really paying attention. Like, hey, thanks for updating your personal page. Thank you for making your first donation. Thank you for doing this last year. All of those types of things. Thank you for being a team captain and having 10 members on your team. You get all that by data, and it doesn't take much time to make sure that you're communicating that back to your participants so they feel acknowledged. A group that you really want to help out and highlight and promote and reach out to are your team captains, right? They are normally more engaged than other participants because they're fundraising themselves and probably have a big connection to the cause, but they're also helping their friends and family and contacts fundraise as well. So you want to potentially, these are probably along with your top fundraisers, these are the people that you want to spend a little bit more time with, and maybe take the time to give them a call or reach out to them personally to tell them how important they are. Reconsider your fundraising incentives. Moving along onto the next item, really make sure that your fundraising incentives make sense and they fit and they're achievable. I think this is right from Bike for Chai, and they're a client on Rallybound, and they're doing great things. And I think they have these great levels, these different clubs, and it's really easy to see who's reached what level. And they do a great job of communicating that and shouting from the rafters who's their top fundraisers and how many, and not only how much they've raised, but how many donors they have. I think it's just a really compelling message. This is right on the front page of their campaign homepage. When you're looking at your data and you have these different fundraising levels and incentives, have a look and see how many people are falling short of your lowest tier, and you might want to lower it. If it's a physical event, it all depends on what type of campaign it is, right? If it's a physical event, like a 5K, they might not raise, your primary donor might raise zero. Your primary participant might raise $0, right? Because they're there to do a 5K. So a large percentage might raise zero. But if you start looking at potentially giving away a t-shirt or some other incentive, or just a badge once they've raised their first $100, that's great. But if still the majority are either raising zero or only 50, it's not being very successful. So you want to lower those initial levels so that even the fat cat can get to it. Test different types of communications to help encourage your participant to reach those goals. Hey, congratulations on raising your first $50 or your first $10, receiving your first donation. Here's some tips to raise the next ones. Or hey, we see you've already raised $250. That's incredible. Here's can you share your story and what worked with for you with others? That type of thing. Just really dig into the data and find out who's in those different buckets and find the right ways to encourage them to move up that ladder. Kind of the opposite of what I started out with in this section is, again, if alternatively it seems that too many people are quickly reaching your lower tier, consider raising it a bit, right? Just like Michael Scott, raising the roof. Feel free to, again, look at your data and see what it's showing you. If you have a fundraising goal of $50 and, while majority, which would be great, are raising, 75 instead, or maybe it's, 62, raise it up to 75 and get people to stretch a little bit further to that next goal. Again, just digging in, looking for trends, looking for where those big batches are kind of coming in your total donations per participant and per team, and finding the right incentives to move people along that path. Now, let's talk about the actual physical events. If you're doing a physical event, a lot of data can be captured there, both in peer-to-peer tools, but also on event day shipping services. You might have other scanners, you might have other information, you follow-up surveys, asking questions, interacting with your volunteers, getting their feedback, and from participants and staff, how did everything go, right? You just have to make sure you look at all that data that's potentially out there and mine it for what's useful. Simple things like, did you have a photo booth and was it booked solid? Were people waiting a long time and this thing that you wanted to do to add a little bit more fun just turned frustrating for everybody? Well, either don't do it or more than likely add a second, photo booth. Was parking just way overfilled the parking lot? What can you do to improve that? You want to make these environments as safe and fun and enjoyable as possible. First and foremost, safe, but make sure you're taking all this feedback, all this data that you have, both in your data source and from, again, your staff. Don't forget the staff, volunteers, and all your participant feedback, and making sure you take the most of it. Same thing with if you're doing a silent auction. Did it raise much? And if not, well, maybe consider better prizes. Or if you raised a lot, well, go back to those same sponsors and see if we can up the ante a little bit. Right? There's a lot that can be done. And now the really tough one is kind of hard a lot of times to look in the mirror and see if you're still doing the right things, right? But you should start out by, even before you start your campaign, make sure you get sign off. I kind of beat this drum a lot if you've ever heard one of my sessions before, but define what your goals are and then measure against those throughout, both before, during, and after a campaign to see how you measured up against that. But define what success means to your organization, whatever it might be. Maybe it's the number of people, new constituents. We have a client doing another webinar with next week that first time they used the platform that they used, first time they ever did this campaign, they raised just a little over $10,000. And I was like, ooh, kind of worried for them, but they go, no, that's great. Our goal was to reach some new constituents, some younger constituents, and that's what we did. And it was our first time, and we learned a lot, and we can improve on it, and we're off and running again. So their funds probably barely covered all the different costs, if you even did that, involved with that particular campaign, but they're ready to do it and probably double their numbers this year. So is it a number of people? Is it the fundraising dollars? Is it net revenue? Number of sponsors? What is it? Or kind of a stew or a combination of a bunch of different things that you really want to make sure you measure success by. Whatever you determine success by, make sure it's measurable and compare it against what your goals were. Again, dig into your data. Make sure it met your needs. Make sure it reached your goals. And sometimes you just have to make the hard decisions. Don't be afraid to fail. Try. If you never try, you never succeed, right? You can't win if you don't play. So give a campaign a shot. Make it realistic goals initially, but at some point, if you realize this is fun, people are that are involved are enjoying it, but it's just not getting it done, then it's time to try a new type of campaign. It's just that simple. If you're not doing a physical event, for example, virtual campaigns are relatively easy to set up, have relatively low overhead compared to a physical event, but unless you spend a fair amount of time marketing and communicating and engaging people to get involved with the campaign, it's not going to be successful. So you got to find out different ways to really promote it and make it the success that you need. And don't be afraid to stop it if it's not there for you anymore. All right. All of this has been talking about data analysis. The most important thing is don't get stuck in analysis paralysis, right? You can look at data for weeks and months and dig in and kind of just you can really make data say whatever you want it to say at some point. Tell whatever story you need it to tell in one way or another, but use it for good, and don't over-analyze data. Stay on target. Be sure to identify the metrics that are most relevant to your campaign and focus on improving a couple areas at a time. To that end, when you're making changes and testing out different things, kind of doing A/B testing or making slight tweaks to your campaigns, only pull one or two levers at a time so that you can truly get an idea of which ones are making the impact. If you change too many things at once, you might be really successful or the opposite, and you won't know what helped that change. So the whole thing is kind of a crawl, walk, run approach to these type of campaigns. Put out the first year, then make it better, make some adjustments. You don't have to wait the entire year. You can try some different email subject lines, some different content in your emails, some different messaging, different tone. Maybe one's more focused on the mission and where the money is going to, another one's focused on the tactical of here's some fundraising tips, that type of thing, and try these different things out with different message tones and see which ones are most successful and have the best open rates and the best click-through rates, and see the donations increasing the following week, and then you can continue to hone in on those improved changes. All right, I know I said 8 things, but I'm throwing in one more. Make sure your data hygiene is a priority. Everything from, it's important to run data integrity queries or DIQs frequently. And what does that mean frequently? Rule of thumb is at least once a week, figure out different queries and different things to make sure that your data is, if it's integration, make sure everything's syncing properly, make sure the data is appropriate, make sure your duplicates are under control, because whatever online fundraising system you have, you're going to have duplicates because there's average humans and even smarter humans on the other end of that computer, but they're human nonetheless, and they're going to mess up your data. It's just a fact. That's what humans do. We mess up data. So have a process for cleaning your data and start out making it someone's job to do at least weekly and adjust from there, and just make sure that you're always checking things, on a regular basis. In addition to that, make sure you update your data database policies and procedures. Keep staff members well trained, and then also revisit your staff onboarding checklist and make sure that they understand that that's kind of an important part, not just kind of, it's a very important part of their day-to-day routine. And everybody's responsible for making sure that the data in there is useful, because none of those tips work, the previous ones, if your data is not clean, right? It can be kind of embarrassing to say, hey, thanks for, coming to our event for the first time, and it turns out they've been coming for the last, 10 years and been using that same email address. Something just happened and you deleted it, or whatever happened, or thank you for raising, your first $1,000, but they raised 10,000 historically, because you happen to pull a query, without including all the different legacy events or whatever it might be. Regardless, is really important. There's a link to a little separate blog article with more details about that specific topic, because that can go on and on. But and I'm sure it feels like it has been with just watching that GIF continue to repeat. But so in summary, all of these tips hopefully can help you tweak, improve, focus your data analysis and your engagement with your constituents. The more you learn about them, the more you can help them have a better experience, and the more you're going to be able to communicate them in the right ways. And Tim, anything to add to that, or I'm going to switch it back to you?
Yeah, I mean, that beside one, I am wondering what's the GIF of the guy rolling over the car, actually.
You like that? I was looking for some kind of a way to represent an overfilled parking lot.
Overfilled parking lot. That's good. That's a good one. Yeah, I think we could. I definitely want to encourage people to ask questions. There's a lot to unpack here. What I'd love to do is take some of the practical lessons in a very, very focused way around the Neon One Rally Bound product. And I'm going to do this in a little bit of a unique way, insofar that when I go ahead and share my screen over here, Mark, can you see these little kids right here?
I can.
So these are my children, actually. And so I used Rally Bound recently for a campaign, and so I actually wanted to start there in terms of a personal story of why, when you're doing all this, you have to make it easy for people to tell their own story, because if you make it difficult for your fundraisers to even onboard into the platform and then get things set up, they're not going to be able to actually do what you want them to do to actually get your campaign to succeed. So in Rally Bound, there's some nifty little features that even allow you to create this checklist. So I checked off the box in terms of this, but you can edit this to even have some custom ones. There's badge elements that you can definitely have. But when you're setting these types of things up, the thing that you were talking about most that really kind of made me think, hey, you know what, Mark, like, this is important, are those emails, actually. And so being able to have a lot of different templates queued up for your fundraisers to actually make it easy to do outreach to people is something that you can create. I was doing a very small campaign. We were raising money for my sister-in-law's memorial charity. So she passed away from breast cancer in 2011. And so my wife and I, said, okay, let's raise some money for her organization, so the Megan Lally Memorial Fund. And so, being able to put information in there where the fundraiser, sometimes the fundraisers, they have a passion for the campaign, but the donors actually don't know about the nonprofit, right? So being able to make it easy for them to tell their story and have that emotional connection is something that you can help queue up for organizations. But it's kind of cool that even somebody within the platform itself can start doing fundraising reports, actually add offline donations here for confirmation, bring in their contact book. So maybe I even want to import contacts. You're able to actually import from a lot of different things. So this helps with the data integrity too, in terms of being able to say, okay, I know with confidence that this is this email. But what's nice in the administrative back end of Rallybound is that you can also queue these templates up for people on the admin side. And so if I want to actually, let's see, fundraiser email template is one that we set up there. And then, you know what? Those are people. So yeah, there's a lot of different things that you can create templates in those merge fields and actually just kind of set that up right from here, which is pretty nifty. And even when you're doing the kind of transaction reporting, you can look at donors, you can look at all these different types of things. But then what's also nice is that in the settings area, from an integrity standpoint, this is one of those key things that Rallybound does very well. And Mark has done extensive work on this with Salesforce, where actually Neon CRM is one of the integrations that you have, but Rallybound can connect with Salesforce in a very, very detailed way. It can connect with things like MailChimp or Constant Contact, Google Analytics. But with Neon CRM, it's nice because you can actually port in donations, tie it to a specific campaign, and just be able to kind of sync that information over without having to do a lot of extra work. So that's a big piece around the Neon One ecosystem, is that data integrity. And actually, I'll do from a personal standpoint, Mark. I'm going to show a quick video of me. Sorry, folks. Data integrity is important. So when you're mailing out pieces like this, if you could see that, this is something that we just got printed, sent over to us. If we have the wrong address for these people, that's going to cost the Megan Lally Memorial Fund money. That's a very practical example and actually scales. We're an all volunteer nonprofit when we do this to get this together. My wife did this in her spare time after work. If your organization has dedicated staff members for this, then it's their job being on the line if a bunch of these things gets actually returned. So
great point.
Just wanted to have a little bit of quick overview in terms of our practical lessons today. I do want to launch a very quick poll in terms of if you are interested in learning more information about Rallybound. Would love to have that. Otherwise, we're going to open it up for some Q&A at this point.
Yeah, and while you're doing that, just wanted to mention, again, you showed briefly the Salesforce integration and just how it's really powerful, well documented. And we recently put out a report on different platforms that integrate with Salesforce, and yeah, I'm really impressed with the level of detailed documentation that you guys have on that, and how thorough it is. So that well done there. And that's all the key, like you said. If you don't have those, if you have different systems that are just silos otherwise, unless you have good integration.
Well, and the integration piece is I think one of the most overlooked things when it comes to even peer-to-peer, because a lot of times you have the fundraiser event team that is just really just trying to create that experience for people, right? And data is important insofar that they want to be able to run the campaign well. But at the end of the day, there might be major gift officers at an organization that might not even know that the event happened, right? And so
exactly.
And so that's the key thing there, that if you can create a process where everybody is on the same page and your database of record is synced up, that's key. That's key. And so we take that very seriously at Neon One, but I know that this is something that you see all the time, Mark. So what do you think when it comes to data? What's some of the most key kind of KPIs, if you will, key performance indicators, when it comes to peer-to-peer campaigns that people should be paying attention to in the next few weeks if they're doing something? Because peer-to-peer, actually, especially all digital ones, gets very popular when it comes to things like Giving Tuesday. People are doing Facebook fundraisers, for instance. What should people be paying attention to in the next few weeks?
Oh yeah, that's I could go a lot of different directions. You hit a lot of key catchphrases, right? Facebook
Yes.
fundraising, Giving Tuesday. This year, Giving Tuesday is so late. It's going to be very interesting how it plays into end of year fundraising. In fact, we were just talking about that internally today. But when it comes to your peer-to-peer campaigns, if they're kind of evergreen or last the entire year, or just kind of wrapping up at the end of the year, definitely want to keep an eye out for if you're kind of stealing from one campaign just to fund another one. And same thing with Facebook fundraising. There's a lot wrong with Facebook fundraising, but there's no ignoring the fact that it raises a lot of funds. We have one client that did a physical bike ride and raised $5.5 million, and $1 million of that came through Facebook fundraising. So you can't ignore them, even if you're not going to get all the data. But they were able to also look into that data, and verify that a lot of that was net new. So they didn't just get the same amount of funds just through different. So that's one thing to check. But also, even look at year over year, from weeks out and days out from event or an end of a campaign, and see how you're doing. So you can always make sure you're comparing apples to apples and adjusting your messaging and your urgency and your success or lack thereof based on previous year's numbers.
Year over year is important. We actually did a study that about, Mark, in terms of fundraiser retention. And if you keep your fundraisers 3 to 4 years, you're going to see about 130% increase in their revenue that they bring in. And that's because they're comfortable. They especially if you have a consistent platform, or even if you're switching over to something like user-friendly platform, then it's going to be easy for them to go back, get their contacts going, and just kind of reinitiate the campaign. And so, year over year is not just important at the campaign level, but even at the fundraiser level. And then, of course, there's the whole idea of donor retention. But yeah, Facebook's a head scratcher, man. I go back and forth on that one because there's the numbers don't lie, and even Rallybound syncs with it. A lot of platforms are starting to at least do some base, like Facebook fundraiser syncing, like we do that, a few others do that, obviously, but they still don't give you that much data at the end of the day.
No, I mean, it sounds like a sync would be like, oh, great, that solves everything. Well, no, what it does is give you, the money going towards that progress meter is the main thing. But you still don't have the donor data that you should. I mean, Facebook gives data away to everybody, but the nonprofits that could actually use it for good, so go figure. They're evil and should burn. But I like to put that at least in one presentation a day.
Well, we are recording this, folks. We are definitely recording today's presentation, and that's fine.
And feel free to reach out to me, Facebook.
Oh yeah, no, they don't care. They don't care.
Right.
So yeah, actually, in terms of today's presentation, if you folks do have any questions, we'll be open for a few more moments. Otherwise, Mark, are there any final thoughts that you wanted to put out there as people prepare for their end of the year and into 2020 planning?
Yeah, I mean, that's really it, right? Make sure you are planning. And I'm not, I don't mean that in a derogatory sense, but just a friendly reminder. You're all very busy, but now's a great time to mine data. And I'm seeing all these posts with great suggestions about Giving Tuesday campaigns and end of year. But what happens afterwards? Make sure you're taking the time to do the postmortem and do the reporting and the analytics necessary to see what worked, who's coming, what their personas are, and learn more about everybody that's really interested in raising funds for your campaigns.
Awesome. Well, Mark, this was a great presentation. It was GIF-tastic. It got me
Well
jazzed and makes me think about what I can do for my own campaigns and what people can really kind of do to take things to the next level. Feel free to reach out to Mark or us if you do have any questions. We're going to be following up with some collateral. And want to thank everybody for attending today, and otherwise have a lovely rest of your Thursday.
Take care, everyone.
All right. Have a good day.